Hey guys, let's continue learning about non-Mendelian genetics. This time we're going to learn about sex determination, sex-linked traits, and polygenic inheritance. So sex determinations. Humans, we know, have 23 pairs of chromosomes, right? In their pairs, so that gives us our total of 46. Well, if you were to arrange all of your chromosomes from longest to shortest, the first 22, the longest of the pairs of chromosomes, we call those your autosomes. And on those autosomes, you will find all of the genes that control your traits such as hair color, eye color, height, whether you can roll your tongue, whether you have a widow's peak, etc. Now, the very last pair of chromosomes make up your sex chromosomes. And depending upon the combination of sex chromosomes you get, that determines the sex of you, and also it carries on those chromosomes any traits that are linked to your sex. So it's important right now to distinguish between sex and gender. Sex is a biological function, and there's only two sexes, male and female. We will not be talking about gender when we use sex-linked traits. You will see male and female, girl and boy are gender pronouns, and those have no place here in sex-linked or sex determination problems. Okay, so let's go ahead and look at the two different combinations of alleles or the genotypes you can have and the sex that they make up. If you inherit two of the same sex chromosomes, that means two X chromosomes, your genotype would be XX, and that would make you biologically female. If you inherit two different sex chromosomes, one we call an X, that's the bigger one, and the Y is the smaller chromosome, your genotype would be XY, and you would biologically be male. There's no other combination of human genotypes or chromosomes for your sex chromosomes. That's it, XX or XY. And those are both your genotypes. Okay, so when we do a problem and we're determining sex, there's only one possible problem you can do. Having a male reproduce with a female. That's it. You can't have two females biologically having a child or two males. It's just male and female. So when we put the parent cross together, we have XY times XX. And we put the male chromosomes, or sorry, the male alleles across the top and the female alleles down the side, and we cross them together, keeping the X's first because it's alphabetical. So the first box would be XX, second box, XY, third box, XX, and fourth box, XY. So when determining the genotypic ratio, there is a 50% chance of having a child with the genotype XX and a 50% chance of having a child with the genotype XY. So when we interpret that into phenotypes, there is a 50% chance of having a male and a 50% chance of having a female, which is the reason why every time you have ever heard of somebody who's pregnant having a 50-50 chance they're going to have a boy or a girl, that comes down to the science of every time a woman gets pregnant, there is a 50-50 chance of having a male or female. Okay, you will never see another type of problem with sex determination because there is no possible combination other than this one. But that leads us to sex-linked traits. Like I said before, sex-linked traits are all traits controlled by genes located on your X chromosome, only on the X chromosome. And there are three traits that you need to know about that are related to sex and the X chromosome. And they are color blindness, the inability to distinguish between colors, hemophilia, a blood clotting disorder, and also baldness. And regardless of the type of sex-linked trait it is, all three of these traits are recessive. And we need to keep in mind they are located on the X chromosome. So let's look at genotypes. We know that males have a genotype XY. And so because males only inherit one X chromosome, they will either inherit the dominant allele and be normal, or they will inherit the recessive allele and have the disease because there's only one X chromosome. So when we look at, let's say, baldness, males are either going to be bald and have inherited the recessive allele on their X, or they're not going to be bald. Okay, so I put the picture of Bruce Willis here. He went bald, so we know that he actually carries the allele recessive on his X chromosome from one of his parents. Now, females, on the other hand, their genotype is a little bit different because they have a second X chromosome. So the only way a female can express one of these three recessive traits is if they inherit both recessive alleles on each of their X chromosomes. So it's twice as difficult for a female to express a sex-linked trait, which is why you rarely see a female who is bald, who is colorblind, or is a hemophiliac. Now, if a female inherits one recessive and one dominant allele, that makes her genotype heterozygous, and she is referred to as a carrier. Okay, phenotypically, she is normal, meaning that phenotypically she does not have the disease, but she's a carrier because her genes carry the trait to pass on to her offspring, which means that they might be able to have hemophilia, baldness, or color blindness. But she herself phenotypically doesn't express any of those traits. So this brings us to what it looks like when you write these genotypes out. The alleles we use for sex-linked traits are X's and Y's because those are the two possible alleles you can have to determine whether you are male or female. However, we include a superscript, like with multiple alleles, but we only write it on the X chromosome because that's where sex-linked traits are found. So if you are looking at hemophilia as an example, a normal female is a description to say that you are homozygous, dominant, and female. Your genotype would be X capital H as a superscript, X capital H. A normal male would be X capital H Y. You never write the letter on the Y chromosome because that's not where sex-linked traits are found. Hemophilia is found on the X. So a normal male is X capital H Y. A carrier female would be heterozygous for hemophilia. So she would have a genotype X capital H, X lowercase h. Notice there's no possible carrier male phenotype because they can't have a second allele for hemophilia because they don't have a second X chromosome. But you can be a hemophilic female if you inherit two recessive alleles, one on each of your X's, or you can be a hemophilic male by receiving a lowercase h and a Y chromosome. So those are your different genotypes. Now, if we're talking about color blindness, then substitute all these letters for C's, and if you're talking about baldness, you replace all those H's with B's. But still, you would use the same layout for your genotypes. So let's look at a practice. A colorblind man has a child with a woman who is a carrier for color blindness. So we know that the parent cross, if you are male and colorblind, you have to be X with a lowercase c. Notice I use the underline function in order to differentiate between the capital and the lowercase. So there's my male genotype, and my female is a carrier, so she's heterozygous. I'll put my male, his alleles across the top, and my female down the side, and I cross them. You need to keep your X's first because it's alphabetical, and you need to keep your dominant alleles within your X's before any recessive. So in the first box, my genotype would be heterozygous for color blindness, so X capital C, X lowercase c. My second box, I would be X capital C, Y. My third box, I would be homozygous recessive. And my fourth box, X lowercase c, Y. So the question asks, what are the chances that they would have a colorblind son? I have to look at the entire Punnett square when you do this. And the only box that would give me a male who is colorblind is in this bottom right-hand box. So that would be 25%. Always take any of these questions out of the entire Punnett square. So the third problem of inheritance today is a polygenic problem. Now, poly, if you know your prefixes, means many, and genic meaning gene. So when you break this down, it means that there are traits that are dictated by inheriting several different genes. And that's actually what happens for most human traits, which is why up until now I've tried to shy away from a lot of human traits, because most of the time we have several genes that determine our phenotype. So the four main examples that you need to know of polygenic inheritance are hair color, eye color, height, and skin tone. And the reason that these are the four main examples is because if we were to line everybody up in here by height, there would be a gradient of individuals from really short to really tall. Or if we're looking at eye color, from really light blue to really dark brown/black eye color. And what determines your height, your hair color, your skin tone, your eye color, etc., is the number of dominant alleles you inherit. The more dominant alleles, the taller you would be, or the darker brown eyes you would have, or the darker brown hair or black hair you would have, etc. So there's actually no Punnett square that you will ever do for polygenic inheritance, because the square would have more than 16 boxes in it, and dihybrid problems are as complicated as you need to get. But what you do need to know is that polygenic inheritance problems produce a range of phenotypes, and therefore can be represented with a bell curve, where the average in the population would actually have a dominant phenotype. So I want you to go ahead and on your piece of paper, I want you to set up your axes and put height across the bottom and number of individuals across the x-axis, or the y-axis, excuse me. So if we were to measure everybody in here, a majority of the population would fall between 5 feet and 6 feet tall. Okay, so very few of us would be below 5 feet or below 4.5 feet. Most of us would fall between 4.5 feet and about 5.5 or 5'10". Then there would be fewer, but still more, that would fall around the 6-foot range, and very few that would fall above 6 feet tall. So that's polygenic inheritance. So check yourself. Which parent's gametes are responsible for determining their child's sex? Which chromosome are sex-linked traits located? Can a male normal for hemophilia ever have a daughter who's hemophilic? And what are 3 examples of polygenic inheritance?